Welcome to Bet with Bobano, Monday, February the 12th. Happy day after the Super Bowl. I'm Ian Cameron. Hope you survived your Super Bowl Sunday. Hope you're not all of you, hopefully, are not in hangover mode following yesterday, but obviously the end of another NFL season. And at least it ended with a very entertaining Super Bowl, dramatic, tense, exciting, dramatic conclusion right to the finish. And shout out and thank you to the Kansas City Chiefs, who were the side that I was on in that Super Bowl. And I got to the point where after watching them beat the Bills and beat the Ravens and seeing what this team continues to do as far as their track record as an underdog, I just said, I'm done going against that. And finally, we ended up seeing the Kansas City Chiefs get it done once again in a very competitive game last night. Very well played. Nice to see some defense for a change. You know, if you're the 49ers, again, it's going to be missed opportunities because I thought they carried the play early. They were winning at the line of scrimmage, really on both sides of the football in the first half. They had what seemed like a pretty firm grasp on the game, even though they were only up by 7 at that point in the game. But third quarter comes around. They get a quick 2-3 and out at Kansas City, and they just couldn't extend that lead beyond 10-3. And they, kept allowing the Chiefs to just hang in there. Chiefs get a field goal, make it 10-6. And then, of course, the disaster strikes. The turnover on the kick return, on the punt return by San Francisco. It's just a disaster play that you just can't have happen when you're trying to beat a team like that and a quarterback like that. And, of course, the Chiefs and Mahomes punch it in the very next play, take the lead. And it was back and forth until then, but it really felt like a boatload of the momentum was gone for the 49ers after that fumble. And then it goes to overtime. And look, they got the ball first. I was shocked that so many 49ers players said after the game they weren't sure of what the overtime rules are. Your coach has to instill it's got to drill that down to the players, what the overtime rules are. There's no reason someone on the 49ers as a player should not be aware of what the rules are for overtime. Know that both teams possess the ball now in overtime in a playoff game. And that rule was changed, of course, after the Chiefs-Bills playoff game a few years ago, where in that classic with Josh Allen against Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs got the won the coin toss. They got the ball to receive in overtime, and they went right down the field and scored a touchdown, because back then you could win a game with a touchdown on the first possession. The Bills never got the ball in overtime. Bills looked at that as, wow, that's unfair. And then, of course, the rule gets changed, and now both teams get possession of the ball. Now you can't end the game with a touchdown when you get the ball after you win the coin toss to begin overtime. So how the hell the Niner players did not know that is absolutely absurd. And I was stunned when I heard that there's multiple San Francisco 49ers players use check, and there's someone else too talking about they just weren't sure what the rules were in overtime. How do you allow that to happen? It's just mind-boggling. But nevertheless, the Chiefs, of course, get the touchdown because you just can't give Patrick Mahomes a chance with the game on the line. He has done it in the clutch over and over again, and he did it once again last night. And the Chiefs win their third Super Bowl under Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And now they're going to have a chance to go for a rare three-peat next year. And if you're anyone in that AFC, whether you're Buffalo or you're Baltimore or you're Cincinnati, you're going to be probably better again with Joe Burrow healthy again. Houston, who's on the rise. All of these great teams in that conference are still going to have to somehow get their way past Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, if they're going to get to a Super Bowl. So not an easy task, and that goes without saying. But fun Super Bowl. It ended up being profitable for me. A slight loss on the props overall, but the Kansas City Chiefs cashing in for me made it a profitable Super Bowl overall. It was a great NFL season for me after a rough start. The NFL season for me finished plus 11.2 units of profit. So that was 11,200 profit using the unit scale that I use. And it was a very solid season after a bad start. I kind of wanted to do better with the season win totals and the futures report. We did have a loss with those. Couple of things I would have probably a redo on was betting the NFC South win totals at all. That was just a shit show of a division. I probably should have completely stayed away from that. But nevertheless, it was a good NFL season. And looking forward to next year and another season ahead. All right, That's the Super Bowl. Enough talking about things of the past. Let's talk about things of the future, as in tonight. We do have a huge NBA card. I didn't get the chance to do the graphics today on the screen for this show, so you have to apologize for that. But we will go through every game on the NBA card once again, and we will start with the Indiana Pacers taking on the Charlotte Hornets. Indiana, 9.5-point road favorites, 238 the total here in this game. Indiana, of course, a team that is in the Eastern Conference mix right now as far as the postseason is concerned. Charlotte, of course, is not at 11-41. And Charlotte, for really a good chunk of the last month or two, has been, even with the big numbers they're getting, and they're pretty much an underdog in every game. I've been betting against them. I had been betting against them quite a bit, but I finally lost going against Charlotte with the Laker game, where the Lakers won, but they only won by 6 as double-digit favorites. And then after that, we saw Charlotte, cover the number in defeat against Toronto. They did get blown out by Milwaukee, 120-84 on Friday night. And then they did bounce back, though. I was very impressed. Saturday on a back-to-back, after being absolutely crushed in Milwaukee, they come back home, play Memphis. They win outright as 5.5-point underdogs, 115-106. So Charlotte now has covered 3 of the last 4. This is going to be a little bit of a step up for them, with all due respect to Memphis, Toronto. This will be a little bit of a taller challenge for them here against this Indiana team. That being said, you look at the Pacers, and yes, they've won 3 of their last 4, but they haven't been overly reliable as bigger favorites. The last 4 times that we have seen the Pacers as a 6-point favorite or more, they're only 1-3 against the spread in those games. They didn't cover in a victory against Memphis, won by 6 as -7. They were against Houston, 8-point favorites. They barely won by 3. Golden State, 6-point favorites, lost that game outright by 22 points. The only win in cover was actually against this Charlotte team, 115-99 back on February the 4th, 8 days ago. And I actually really liked Indiana in that game. I don't like them laying the number for some reason tonight, because we are starting to see Charlotte play a little bit more competitive as far as covering numbers is concerned. It's also a Charlotte team. They've been banged up quite a bit lately. They've had a lot of injuries to deal with. They're starting to get a little bit healthier. The center, Nick Richards, is back. It looks like Cody Martin's got a chance to play tonight. They are still without LaMelo, and he won't be back tonight for Charlotte. But you are starting to see Charlotte play some better basketball. And as far as competitiveness, Indiana after tonight plays in Toronto on Wednesday night. That is obviously going to be kind of a homecoming of sorts, or a return of sorts for Pascal Siakam. Siakam hasn't played, I believe, in Toronto since the trade. So that's kind of going to be a special environment for the Pacers. I mean, I could see Charlotte covering this number. I could. I don't know if we're going to get Indiana with the 48 minutes of requisite focus that you need if you're going to cover this number on the road. I just don't. So I ain't rushing to bet Charlotte, but I would definitely lean in that direction here in this matchup. All right, let's move along. We've got Philly and Cleveland. Cleveland, 11-point home favorites, 230 being the total in this game. I have not once since Joel Embiid went down to injury, not once have I backed the Philadelphia 76ers. And I'm not really about to start now. But credit to them on Saturday. We did see them win and cover at Washington, snapped a 4-game losing streak, beating the Wizards 119-113. You're not playing the Washington Wizards here now in that game tonight here against this Cleveland team. I love everything about this Cavs team. I love that they play defense. I love that they hit the glass. They're an excellent rebounding team. Bickerstaff's done a nice job. Donovan Mitchell is finally, I think, putting the nonsense behind him. Some of the antics we see from him. He's playing like a focused superstar right now for this team. He's been sensational. Darius Garland is healthy. I mean, you have a Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland starting backcourt. That's pretty damn good. And you're seeing what Cleveland can do with that. They've got the size in the low post, the size in the front court as well, which you like to see from Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. It's a very, very complete team. They play defense. They rebound the basketball. They now have a backcourt that's very lethal. I think their offensive production has improved. And again, like I say, they got the size as well. So there's really a lot to like about Cleveland. I've got Cleveland to win the East. I do. And I don't mind. And I know everyone's going to talk about Boston and Philly and Milwaukee and all season we've thought of them as the 3 favorites. Well, don't sleep on New York and don't sleep on this Cleveland team. This Cleveland team is absolutely, I think, a major threat right now in the Eastern Conference. It would not surprise me to see them make a deep playoff run. They've won 9 straight games entering tonight. And what's amazing, too, is the point spread value has stayed pretty consistent, pretty true for Cleveland. They're also 6-3 ATS the last 9 games. The last time we saw these two teams play, it was a Cleveland victory in Philadelphia as 8-point dogs, winning 122-119 in overtime. And keep in mind, in that game, Joel Embiid did play for the Philadelphia 76ers. Embiid, Harris, Maxey, Beverly. That was a full-strength Philadelphia team that night when Cleveland beat them. So, I can't back Philly. No, look, you're not laying a bargain here with Cleveland, but I think Cleveland is still the way I would go in this game. I like the over a little bit because Philly's really struggling. That's the one thing about Embiid being off the floor. There's zero resistance in the paint, zero resistance in the low post defensively right now for the Philadelphia 76ers, and that is a big-time problem right now, especially when you look at the twin towers of Mobley and Allen. You got to deal with that. Where's the rim protection going to be? Who is going to stop those two guys from feasting in the low post without Embiid there? Again, this is a Philly team that lacks a little bit now in that front court without Joel Embiid. So it's, I think, a big-time matchup advantage for Cleveland. I could only look at Cleveland here minus the 11, minus 10.5, minus 11. What I would do is probably split between the over, the full game over at 229.5, 230, and maybe a Cleveland team total over, which you can find right now at 120.5. I definitely think you could see Cleveland go over the team total tonight, and I definitely think the full game has a pretty good chance to go over the total. Yeah, Mobley rebounds, absolutely. Someone in our chat mentioning that. I think that's worth a look. Jared Allen, too. Jared Allen and Mobley props makes perfect sense to me, given the matchup that they're going to get here tonight against this weakened, depleted Philadelphia front line going into that game tonight. All right, next up, we've got San Antonio and Toronto. The Raptors, 6.5-point home favorites, 236.5 the total. I'm not laying points with the Raptors, not doing that. It's just a question for me of do I want to back San Antonio, because suddenly here's San Antonio that it's been pretty ugly for them the last few games too. 0-4 straight up, 0-4 against the spread, all 4 losses by double digits. Not even close in any of these games. They lose by 16 to Cleveland. They lose by 12 at Miami, although that game they were close to Miami for a while, and it just got away from them in the fourth quarter. They got blown out by 16 at Orlando, blown out by 20 at Brooklyn. It's not exactly a team coming in here with a ton of confidence right now. So that would be a concern for me in this game, even though they're relatively healthy. Both teams are, actually. Raptors have suddenly got themselves back to just about full health here the last few days. But San Antonio, other than Marcus Morris, everyone healthy. Victor Wembanyama is going to play tonight for the Spurs. It'll be his first time playing in Canada here as an NBA player. The Raptors, they've got themselves as healthy as they've been in a long time with Quickly, Gary Trent, RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, Jakob Poeltl, expected to be their starting 5. It's just a game from a side perspective. I don't want any part of it. I don't want to lay this number with Toronto. I don't know if I'm rushing to back the Spurs right now in San Antonio either, given their recent form, which just hasn't been very good. Totals-wise, San Antonio has given up points again. There's no question. They've been trending under, though, big time. The last 9 San Antonio games, they're actually 8-1 to the under in those games. So very, very heavy toward unders lately. And Toronto, the last 2 games have gone under for them as well, as they've really tried to preach better play on the defensive end of the basketball court. And keep in mind, one of the surprises from a Raptors standpoint about the trade deadline was that they did not trade away Bruce Brown. And I think with Bruce Brown still there, you've got a team that's maybe you got to bump their defensive rating up a little bit, because he is probably one of the better defensive players they've got on this team. So they're betting this game over. I think they figure 2 bad teams, but neither one's really playing extremely fast of late. Neither team has been as bad defensively of late. So I don't know if I love that total move up necessarily as much as the betting markets do. I'm probably staying off this game, though, altogether. All right, next up, we've got Chicago and Atlanta. Atlanta Hawks, 3.5-point home favorites, 238 the total in this game. Looks like from an injury standpoint tonight, Atlanta, it's pretty much the same guys that have been missing for the last few games. Clint Capella is still out. Wesley Matthews is still out, but everyone else is good to go. Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, Sadiq Bey, Jalen Johnson, Onyeka Okongwu are all in for Atlanta. That's their starting five. Looks like on the Chicago side of the equation, Pat Williams is out. It looks like Alex Caruso, toe bruise, questionable for this game with a toe injury for Chicago, and that's one of their better defenders and more versatile defenders as well. Kobe White will play. There was some concern for his status, but it looks like with the left ankle issue, he'll be good to go tonight for Chicago in this game. Atlanta, they have won back-to-back games, and they've actually covered 3 straight and 6-1 against the spread their last 7. So we have seen a little bit of an uptick here in recent form with the Atlanta Hawks. Back-to-back wins against Philly on the road, although, again, a very much shorthanded Philadelphia 76ers squad without Embiid. And then they won and covered against Houston, 122-113 the other night. Pretty impressive considering that game did not start well for Atlanta. They were down 12 after the first quarter, but then they had a huge second quarter and turned a 12-point deficit into I believe, an 8-point lead at halftime. And then they had a pretty good second half. They ended up winning by 9, the Atlanta Hawks in that game. Chicago's off a 114-108 loss to Orlando in their last game. Chicago, has been kind of alternating wins and losses. They are exactly 5-5 in their last 10 games, 6-4 against the spread. We'll see how they fare here in this one tonight. They've actually done okay on the road lately. They've actually covered 3 in a row on the road at Portland, at Charlotte, at Memphis, all losing teams. Atlanta's probably a little bit better than those teams, but you still have to consider Atlanta, a losing team based on their record, 24-29 on the season coming into this game tonight. I'm interested in Chicago here a little bit. I would only look at the Bulls plus 3.5. I'm not comfortable right now still laying a number with the Atlanta Hawks. And it is worth noting they played earlier this year in Chicago. It was a Bulls win, 118-113. Chicago's been trending over lately, 5 straight, in fact. And I don't always trust Atlanta's defense to be great. So that would be the over for me from a totals perspective. And I'll throw out a prop here that I like. And it's someone that I've been cashing with lately from a prop standpoint for Atlanta. Since Capella's been out, Onyeka Okongwu's taken over that number 5 spot, the center spot. He's been going over his point prop a ton. And I mean a ton. Like every recent game, he has gone over his point prop. And the adjustment just has not been strong enough on his point props or his player props in general. So I think you keep hammering away at that until you see you start to lose, because right now this has been like an automatic for me, just coming back repeatedly with Onyeka Okongwu over. First it was 9.5, 10.5 points. The last few games it's been 11.5, 12.5 points. It has trickled up again. I see 13.5 for his prop tonight, but I think you keep riding it because he has definitely been a good over point prop bet lately for the Atlanta Hawks. Onyeka Okongwu, who again is their starting center right now due to the absence of Clint Capella for the Hawks. All right. Next up, New York, Houston. We've got the Knicks, 3-point road favorites, 221.5 the total here in this game in H-Town. Whenever I see Houston as a home underdog, I have to lean that way. They've just been so much better on their home court all season long. 18-9 straight up at home this year. Think about 18 of their 23 victories this year have been at home. This has been Toyota Center's been a good home court for them. 18-9 straight up, 17-9-1 against the spread at home. I just don't like betting against Houston at home necessarily, and neither do the betting markets from the most part because Houston's taken the money here. I think a lot of it too is it's still very much a banged up New York team, a Knicks team that because of the injuries we've seen them kind of struggle a bit the last few games. 3 of their last 4 games they've lost, and 0-4 against the spread as well. The last 4 games. Lose to the Lakers at home. They did win against Memphis, but again, a Memphis team that's not very good and depleted themselves. And then, of course, back-to-back home losses to Indiana and Dallas. And look, you're going to have a hard time beating those teams when you're without the key personnel that the New York Knicks, are without at the moment. So I think when you look at this game here with the Knicks and the Rockets tonight, I'm still concerned about just how depleted this roster is right now. Mitchell Robinson's still out. Julius Randle's still out. That's a big big chunk of your front court, and OG Anunoby as well. He's going to miss another game. And to make matters worse, too, you're already really, really shorthanded in that front court, that in that paint area, that low post. And here's Isaiah Hartenstein, the 25-year-old center that's kind of had a breakout year for the Knicks. I think he's taken his game up quite a bit this year, and he is questionable with an Achilles injury here tonight for the Knicks. So you're already talking about a front court that's already without OG, that's already without Mitchell Robinson, that's already without Julius Randle, and now you might throw a missing Hartenstein into the mix tonight. That's a problem, for this Knicks team potentially tonight, especially when you have to deal with Jabari Smith. You have to deal with Alperen Şengün, who's been outstanding at the center spot for the Rockets. So that's definitely something that you would be concerned about if you're back in the Knicks here. Precious Achiuwa, Josh Hart, DiVincenzo, and Brunson are all good to go. By the way, for the Rockets, Van Vliet is going to miss another game. So Amen Thompson is going to be the starting point guard again with Van Vliet out. And Şengün does have a back injury and is questionable. And he missed the game against Atlanta on Saturday. And obviously, you're talking about a double-double machine pretty much, or close to it, averaging close to a double-double a game, 21.3 points per game, 9.3 boards and rebounds per game. So Şengün's absence would be significant here for Houston. But I could only look at Houston here. I mean, they're struggling against the number. I don't think the Knicks are going to be a team I'm going to be looking to back until they get healthier. So it's Rockets or nothing for me, especially given that gaudy home record that we have seen all season from the Houston Rockets. Glenn in the chat asks about the total. I lean under. Although the one thing that would concern me a little bit about it is, if the front court's depleted, we're going to see a smaller lineup, and the Knicks might be, running and gunning a little bit more than they do if they're going to be as short-handed. Like if Hartenstein doesn't go, this is going to be a small ball lineup. I think that Tibbs is going to roll out there, and that's not always conducive to unders. So it's really, I think, determined. It's really going to come down to what that Knicks starting five looks like, Glenn, as the total. I think if they were fully healthy and they had that front court a little healthier, I'd certainly be interested in an under with the Knicks. And the Knicks have been a good under bet, really, for the last little while, 7-3 to the under in their last 10 games. Houston's games, have trended a little bit more under than they did earlier in the season, and 2 straight have gone under. So I lean under still, but just be a little bit worried personally, I would be, if the Knicks roll out a small ball lineup due to all the injuries that they're dealing with right now in the front court. And by the way, there is a Knick prop that I do like here in this game tonight. I think you got to keep rolling with it because he just continues to get the job done right now for the Knicks, and he's stepped up big time, in the absence of some of these other players, but he's been a massive point producer lately. Not so much the last game against Indiana. He had 14 only. But before that, this guy had gotten to at least 20 points in 6 straight games. And he's been really, really good. Stepped his game up offensively in a starting role now for the Knicks. And it's not delivery, it's DiVincenzo. And his point prop tonight's 18.5. Like I said, prior to that Pacers game, which was New York's last game, he had scored at least 20 points in 6 straight games for this Knicks team. So it's not delivery, it's DiVincenzo. Dante DiVincenzo here for the Knicks. Over 18.5 points, I think, might be worth a look. I forgot to mention, too, Jakob Poeltl for the Raptors against his old team, the Spurs. I could see his point prop going over. That's usually a good angle, a guy facing his old team. So I might look at Poeltl over points in that Raptors-Spurs game that we talked about earlier. All right, next up, we've got Denver-Milwaukee. Denver, 1-point road favorites, 229.5 the total here in this game. It's a revenge spot for Milwaukee. Remember, one of the first games that I think it was the first game where Doc Rivers was behind the bench for the Milwaukee Bucks as head coach. Denver ended up on the victorious side, 113-107 at home against Milwaukee. They won that game. They have since gone 3-2 since then. They lost the next game at Oklahoma City. They beat Portland back-to-back. They beat the LA Lakers, of course, and spoiled Kobe's statue night. And then they, of course, had that brutal spot right after beating the Lakers on Friday night where they got absolutely whipped, 135-106 by Sacramento. It was a clear bad spot for Denver. A rested Sacramento team off a bad loss of their own, and it was just a perfect recipe to probably bet Sacramento in that game on Friday night against Denver, and they took care of business there. So Denver's in bounce-back mode. Denver off a loss. I'm really not all that excited about betting against them anytime they're off a loss. These are the defending champs. They usually respond. I'm going to take Denver here. I don't give a damn about the revenge, quite honestly. I think Denver's just better than Milwaukee. If you look at the Bucks, they are still having issues. This is still a team that is only 2-5 since Glenn Rivers, I should say. Glenn Rivers took over as head coach. 2-5 in his first 7 behind the bench. The only wins were at Dallas, 129-117. And I think Dallas was pretty shorthanded that night. And then the only other win they've had was Charlotte on Friday night, 120-84. So it's not like either of those wins were overly impressive. Like I say, I know it's a revenge factor here from Milwaukee back home. Denver on the road at times this year hasn't always been as consistent, 15-13 straight up on the road, but Denver's the better of these two teams. Milwaukee really hasn't beaten anybody really, really outstanding and at full strength. And that's the key. We do have to see who's going to be in for Denver because they do have a couple of injuries here. It looks like Porter Jr., and it looks like KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, questionable. On the Milwaukee side of the equation, Chris Middleton's still out. Damian Lillard's good to go. And Giannis Antetokounmpo is good to go. They always seem to be on the injury report because they've had things going on all year with them injury-wise. But, yeah, for me, Denver or nothing. I ain't fading them in this price range. All right, New Orleans and Memphis. Pelicans, 9.5-point road favorites, 222 being the total in this game. Pelicans, of course, continuing this road trip of theirs. It started out in L.A. Last week against the Clippers and the Lakers. They beat the Clippers in what was a phenomenal spot, in my opinion, to back the Pelicans as underdogs against the Clippers. They won outright. I thought it was a good bet to back them against the Lakers. I was not correct there, unfortunately, as the Lakers end up 139-122 winners over the Pelicans. It was just an atrocious game defensively by New Orleans. A New Orleans team that actually had started to play much better at that end of the court, but that was an awful game defensively for New Orleans. But they did bounce back. They played at Portland on a back-to-back, and they beat the Blazers 93-84. Much better defensive game from Willie Green's team that night. No question about that. We'll see if they can carry that over here to this matchup tonight against the Memphis Grizzlies. Memphis has now lost 8 in a row. We remember how somehow, some way, this team with just 90% of their roster out was covering numbers repeatedly. That hasn't happened quite as much lately. Not only the 8-game losing streak straight up, but just 1-4 ATS in their last 5 games. And the only cover was 13-point dogs at the Knicks. They lost by 10. Every other game lost by 20 to Golden State, lost by 40 to Boston. They lost by 8 to Chicago, and then they lost by 9 as favorites to the lowly Charlotte Hornets on Saturday. So, yeah, it's New Orleans or nothing here. New Orleans plays Washington at home so they end this road trip after tonight. They go back home and face Washington on Wednesday. That's not a look ahead at all. The Pelicans should have their eyes on the prize here. They should be able to take care of business. And I think we're starting to see, too, Memphis kind of running out of gas with all these guys out of the lineup. I mean, the effort has been admirable from this team. But, Marcus Smart, still out. Brandon Clark, Desmond Bane, Zaire Williams, and, of course, Ja Morant. Finally, you're starting to see them, I think, hit a little bit of a wall here. So for me, it would be Pelicans or nothing. I would lean under the total as well. I'm not so sure where the points are going to come from here in this game tonight. All right, we got 3 games left. Next up, it's Washington, Dallas. Mavericks, 11.5-point home favorites, 247.5 the total. Here in this matchup, Washington Wizards, they're not that auto fade that they were earlier in the season, Washington. They've been able to cover some point spreads. They had covered 2 in a row against Cleveland and Boston. Philly on a back-to-back was a bit of a tough spot, and even then they only lost by 6 as a 5.5-point dog in that game. And now they go to Dallas, take on a Mavericks team that is coming off a mighty satisfying win. Let's put it that way. In fact, they've looked awesome the last 4 games. They've swept the road trip against Philadelphia, albeit short-handed, depleted Philadelphia without Embiid. At Brooklyn, they caught Brooklyn in a bit of a bad spot, too, out of the trade deadline. New York, 122-108. They caught the Knicks with all kinds of injuries. Oklahoma City, 146-111. I think for the Thunder, That was a bit of a tough spot for them. So they've looked great. 4-0 straight up, 4-0 against the spread for this Dallas team the last 4 games. But you could argue that in each game, they caught an opponent in a bad spot or injury riddled or something negative going for that opponent. So that's what would concern me here. It's got the feel to me of a classic flat spot kind of deal for Dallas. I don't trust them in this price range in this spot. You're coming off 3 great road wins against the Nets, the Sixers, the Knicks, and then you had a blowout home win against one of the top teams in the Western Conference, Oklahoma City. I just don't know if this is the spot where you want to trust Dallas to have the focus, laying 11.5, 12 points. And the one thing about Washington, they're healthy. Only Isaiah Livers is out. Meanwhile, Dallas, keep an eye on this. There's very much concerns about who's going to be in. Dante Exum and Derek Lively are out once again for them. And 3 of their starting 5. Luka looks like he's good to go. Luka Doncic will play tonight for Dallas. And it looks like Kyrie will go as well, unless something changes there. But Kleba is also on the injury report. He's listed as probable too, though. So it looks like it should be all systems go for Dallas outside of Exum and Lively, and those 2 guys have been out for a few games. Now, that being said, I don't think it's that spot that I love rushing to lay it with Dallas. They are playing well. That would be the concern going against them, but I would lean Washington here plus 12 in this game. Maybe Washington first half full game split, just in case maybe Washington catches them asleep early. And maybe catches Dallas a little bit, sleepwalking early in the game. Washington is plus 7 in the first half. Could do a little split bet between that and the plus 12. I would certainly only look over in the game as well, especially with Luka and Kyrie expected to both play. We know how lethal this team is offensively when they both play. I mean, they scored 146 themselves against a very good Oklahoma City team in their last game. You could only imagine they could put up some points here tonight. And it is worth noting 6 straight in the head-to-head series have gone over the total between the Washington Wizards and Dallas Mavericks. And the last 2 meeting earlier this year back in November was 130 to 117. It got to 247 as far as the total goes. Now, this number is right at 247. I think it could be close to the number, but I still think it could end up getting up and over that number a little bit. Keep in mind, we saw 257 scored in the Dallas game against Oklahoma City on Saturday. I think this game has some potential to get into the 250s as well. So still would lean over the total there in that game. All right, Golden State, Utah. We've got pretty much a pick 'em here with the Warriors and the Jazz. 240 the total in this game. Golden State with a huge and monster win against the Phoenix Suns Saturday night. Incredible shot by Steph Curry. What did he do? Just catch it off the inbounds pass, hurled it, from just inside half court with 2 seconds left and goes in. Just classic Steph Curry making an incredible shot from long distance to win a game. He's done it a million times in his career, and he did it again Saturday night against the Phoenix Suns to beat them 113 to 112. Don't look now. Golden State 4-0 straight up, 4-0 against the spread their last 4 games. 6-1 straight up, 6-1 against the spread their last 7. 2 wins against Philadelphia, a win against Memphis, a win at Brooklyn, a win at a very good Indiana team, and then they come home in a tough spot. I mean, that's your typical, fade that home team off a road trip spot for Golden State, after playing 5 on the road against a very good Phoenix team. I was on Phoenix Saturday night, and Steph Curry and the Warriors just ripped it right out from my hands, that winning bet with that 3-pointer at the end. So it's not easy to go against Golden State right now. They're starting to gather some momentum. They're finally above 500 again, 25 and 24. I don't think they've given up on a postseason push right here at this stage, and they've got confidence right now. And finally, Steve Kerr has settled on a starting 5. Curry and Kuminga's been a big boon. Kuminga over points is probably worth a look. He's been good lately. But after a win like that, primetime national TV win, come back against Phoenix. Now you go on the road, you face Utah. Is this a great spot for the Warriors? It's not. There's definitely things that's, favor Utah here situationally. Looks like the Jazz are fully healthy for the most part. Walker Kessler, John Collins, Lauri Markkanen, Colin Sexton, and Chris Dunn, the starting 5 going into this game. Looks like the Warriors have won 3 in a row, 3 of the last 4 meetings against Utah. And they've covered 4 straight as well. But Utah did beat them at home back on December 7th, 124-123. Utah was laying 7, though, in that game, likely because of the fact that I believe Golden State was a little bit depleted in that game. Yeah, there was no Steph in that game where Utah beat Golden State. This is a tricky game. It is. Situationally, it's Utah, but Golden State's got the form right now. And if you, again, look at that series history, you'll see that the only Utah win head-to-head against Golden State, was that game in Utah where Steph did not play. December the 28th, they played in Golden State, and Steph, I believe, was he in that game? I'm just checking. No, he was not, actually, and they still beat Utah 112-107. Bottom line is, I definitely leaned Utah initially in this game, and I still do, especially at home. But, Golden State's playing well, so I'm not really rushing to make that bet. The total's gone down a bit to 240. It's funny. Golden State, all of a sudden, they've gone under in 4 straight, and their defense is playing better. Like, they're actually getting some stops. They're actually trying for a change here on the defensive end and seeing some better results there. So I understand why the total's been bet down. For me, it's just a mild lean to Utah. I have not bet this game yet, and I'm not so sure I will before a tip-off. And the final game now of this Monday card, Minnesota. It's a great matchup. Minnesota Timberwolves, LA Clippers, 2 of the top teams in the Western Conference. Both of these teams very much alive still for the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. So this is a big-time matchup here. We've got the Clippers 4.5-point home favorites, 224 being the total here in this game. Clippers had that incredible road trip where they ended up going, I believe, what was the record they had? It was a great road trip, the 7 games, 6-1 on that road trip. They come back home. They had that really a tough spot against New Orleans, and the Pelicans went in there and led wire to wire and beat them outright as 6-point underdogs. But the Clippers did bounce back, at least with a straight-up win, but that game against Detroit was much tougher than I'm sure a lot of people would have thought. 17-point favorites. Clippers really didn't even sniff a point spread cover in that game as the Clippers win 112-106, but the Pistons were right in that game most of the way. So all of a sudden they come back home here, the Clippers, 0-2 against the spread after that great road trip where they went 6-1 and were cashing tickets, including for me, left and right. Now they're going to face a Minnesota team that, there's a lot to like about the Timberwolves right now. I think from a matchup standpoint, it's not a bad matchup here for Minnesota. You could see the length that they have, especially in that front court and their ability defensively. We're talking about a team that's put up consistently this season, start to finish, some of the better defensive numbers in the NBA. They might be able to disrupt, James Harden and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and really make things a little bit difficult here on this LA Clippers team tonight in a which should be quite the battle between these two teams. Now, what I don't love is the fact that these teams just met a few weeks ago, and it was in Minnesota with the 109-105 victory over the LA Clippers in Minnesota. So that puts us in a little bit of a revenge situation, if you will, here for the Clippers. But I mean, you're getting 4.5 with a Timberwolves team that's 6-2 against the spread their last 8 games against winning teams. So that tells me something right there, that when they play better teams on their schedule, they've played those teams pretty well. And look at some of these recent results. You look at what they did at Milwaukee. They went into the Milwaukee against the Bucks and just clobbered Milwaukee 129-105. They went to Oklahoma City, which has had a great home court all year, and they beat the Thunder 107-101 back on January 29th. So they've been good in these road dog spots, against better competition. So, I'm looking at Minnesota here, plus 4.5, plus 5 in this game, thinking that from a matchup standpoint, they're going to be able to disrupt the Clippers a little bit here in this game. So I'm going to look at Minnesota here, plus 4.5, plus 5 in what should be a great late night matchup here tonight between two of the best teams in the Western Conference. All right, before we wrap up the show, we'll, of course, take a brief look at college basketball. Now, there's not a whole lot of games on the marquee tonight in college basketball. Wake Forest and Duke is one of them. We know Wake Forest, I really like their coach. Now, they have had some disappointing results here tonight and so far this season. But in this spot here against Duke, I'm tempted to take Wake here in this game. Wake should have a pretty good advantage as far as their front court. with Reed. He's very good. He can really sort of negate and limit Filipowski for Duke. I think that's a matchup that you really want to be aware of here in this game tonight. And we know Duke sometimes when Filipowski struggles, it can filter through the rest of the team. It's a very important game for Wake Forest because as of right now, I don't personally think they're in the tournament. They've got to go on the road and get a quality, strong road win. So, you are talking about a Wake team that's won 3 in a row. Syracuse at Georgia Tech and against NC State over the weekend. And now you've got a mammoth opportunity on their schedule. I know they've had some ugly road games. They've not been good on the road, honestly, before the Georgia Tech win. They lost at Pitt. They got blown out at North Carolina. They lost at NC State. They lost at Florida State. I get that. But this is a very, very important game for Wake Forest for any sort of hopes for the NCAA tournament. I think they bring a desperate effort. I think they can hang in there. Duke hasn't always been covering at home. Remember the Clemson game they won by just a point. Pittsburgh went into Cameron Indoor and beat them outright. They did cover their last 2 at home against Notre Dame and BC, but this is a better opponent that you're dealing with here in this game. And keep in mind, last year at Duke, it was 75-73 for Duke, a 2-point loss for Wake. They covered the number. They've actually covered 3 straight versus Duke. So I'm going to take Wake here, +7, +7.5. I like the over, too. The total's gone up. I agree. I think we'll see points in that game. West Virginia, TCU. We'll see how TCU responds tonight. But West Virginia's just had some ugly road games. Ugly. You look at Bob Huggins' team you look at West Virginia, on the road. I mean, at Texas, Oklahoma State, UCF, Oklahoma. I mean, they've had some really, really ugly losses on the road. It's hard to back this team, quite honestly, on the road. But when you look at it, I think it's a situation where, even getting all these points, it's difficult. Considering what happened with Huggins there and his ouster, Josh Eilert having to come in, as the head coach here, in a difficult situation. I think it's they've done an admirable job of competing in some of these games, but they're just outmanned on a lot of nights. And now you've got TCU coming back home after back-to-back losses to Texas and Iowa State. It could be walking into a buzzsaw tonight for West Virginia. So I don't know if I'll lay the points, but I'm thinking about it with TCU in that game. The defense, too, for West Virginia, man. That Texas game, I mean, what did they give up? 94 points. They gave up 86 to BYU. So maybe you look at an over or a TCU team total over as well in that game. And then Kansas and Texas Tech. The money's come in on Texas Tech. I agree. I mean, Kansas on the road, no thank you. No thank you. We have seen clear evidence of Bill Self's team going on the road and just not being good enough. 2-4 straight up on the road this season. We already saw them lose at K-State on a Monday night 1 week ago. We saw them lose at Iowa State. We saw them lose at West Virginia as a 10-point road favorite. The only team they've beaten in conference on the road is at Oklahoma State. And lost at UCF. I mean, they've just haven't been very good on the road, Kansas, and I'm not trusting them. And this is a very important game for Grant McCaslin's Texas Tech team. They need a good result here. They're only 1-3 in their last 4 games. They could use a significant home win here against a team like Kansas. So I expect a good result here from this Texas Tech team. You're not getting the number that was available earlier, but I still like them here. -3, 3.5, the current number. I would take them on the money line. You got to pay about $1.65 with Texas Tech on the money line, but I think I would still take them on the money line as opposed to laying the points. I just mild concern that maybe they win by 2 or 3 and just win the game straight up, not so much the number. So, like I said, I like Texas Tech here. It's already in pocket, but now I would say take the money line as opposed to the -3, 3.5 there in that game. And then from the smaller conferences, there are a few extra games. It's not really a ton that sticks out to me. I do like the over in the Nicholls State A&M Corpus Christi game. I think that one should see some points. Lamar in a bounce back spot, or Lamar against an Incarnate Word. Lamar's playing really good. That number looks a little short there with Lamar in that game. That's about it, though, from the extra board tonight. So that's your look at college basketball. Good stuff indeed. Yes, I appreciate. I want to point out too before we wrap it up with my NBA best bet that for now, all my shows that I do on my own channel, and remember, my new channel now is youtube.com/@BobanoBets, my brand new YouTube channel. I had to start one from scratch because the old one got infected by the same shit that occurred to my old Twitter account. So that is now @BobanoBets, my new YouTube channel, and all my content from that channel and all the sports outside of hockey and outside of the Ice Guys will also be simulcast on the Ice Guys YouTube channel for the next month, while we try to establish the audience once again for my new YouTube channel. So again, make sure you subscribe to my new YouTube channel because we're only simulcasting to the Ice Guys channel for a short period of time, maybe another month or so. So again, that's youtube.com/@BobanoBets, where you'll be able to see this show in particular, Bet with Bobano, Mondays and Wednesdays, indefinitely at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Blues are heating up, Sam. I see that question. What do you think of the Blues for the Cups? Plus, I still don't buy them winning the Stanley Cup, but credit to them. They're playing well right now. They're just still, to me, not good enough to get through the West. I mean, Colorado and Vegas and Edmonton and Winnipeg and the gauntlet that you have to go through there. But they are playing well. And right now, they could certainly make the playoffs. And as you know, in that sport, all you do is get in and, you got a crazy chance. Like, look at Florida. Barely got in and got to the Stanley Cup final last year. So I don't want to totally say no to that, but I don't see it. I don't see them going that far in the playoffs if they get in. All right, best bets here for this Monday NBA card. Let's see what I'll pick for best bet here. There's a few good options, but I think I'm going to go with the, let me see here. I think I'm going to go with Denver. Yeah, I'm going to go with Denver. I mean, just asking them to beat Milwaukee, I just think they're better than Milwaukee, period. And I think they'll prove it once again in this game. So, yeah, Denver Nuggets, money line -115 against the Milwaukee Bucks. I like that. I think they get the job done. So, Denver Nuggets, -115 against the Milwaukee Bucks for my best bet for this Monday NBA card. That's a wrap. We hope you enjoyed it. Everyone hit the like button on the way out. This show is Mondays and Wednesdays, 4 p.m. Eastern time, 1 p.m. Pacific time. And we're glad you enjoyed it. I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great Monday night. Bet like Tony Soprano. Bet with Bobano. And we'll see you again Wednesday for another edition of Bet with Bobano.